Former FBI Director James Comey pleads not guilty to 2 felonies. It was no ordinary arraignment, and the prosecution's case may be brittle. We explore. National Guard forces mass outside Chicago. The city's mayor and the state's governor seek to block those troop deployments. The president threatens to arrest them. Shutdown syndrome and the nation's flight grid. Slower TSA checks, more flight controller shortages and delays. Oklahoma Republican Senator James Lankford joins us. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout. Former FBI Director James Comey was arraigned in federal court on 2 charges and pled not guilty to both. We all know this, but it's worth explaining. The government will have to prove its accusations beyond a reasonable doubt. In this case, alleging Comey lied to Congress and obstructed justice. For what it's worth, Comey appears eager for the law and the facts to be tested. There is, though it may not seem to be, a coincidental overlay with Comey's indictment and what's happening in Chicago. The connective tissue is this. What is the government doing? What are its justifications? And can it back up those actions and justifications in court? ICE raids in Chicago have captured some gang members and criminals. According to local reporting, 5 of 800 people swept up so far fall into one of those 2 categories, gang member or criminal. Now, there might be more. We don't know because there's very little visibility into all those arrested in Chicago and the Chicago area and why. We know local officials have challenged some warrantless arrests. The raids carried out by agents in masks and sometimes rappelling from helicopters have created an atmosphere rife with tension, protest, and fear. All this necessary, the government says, to carry out immigration law. This will be tested in court for each arrest, as well as the deployment of National Guard forces to abet those arrests. The mayor of Chicago and the governor of Illinois angrily oppose these federal actions. Today, President Trump threatened both with arrest. The governor, J.B. Pritzker, told Trump, "Come and get me." Here's what it sounded like.
There's one thing I really want to say to Donald Trump. If you come for my people, you come through me. So come and get me.
Moments ago, on another topic entirely, President Trump said negotiations to end the war in Gaza appear so promising, he may fly to the region Sunday, quite possibly Egypt. Aaron Navarro joins us now from the White House on that. Aaron, thank you so much for joining us. What did the president say, and what does it suggest might be happening this weekend?
The president said he might be traveling to the Middle East, Egypt, potentially even Gaza, signaling that he believes that this deal for peace between Israel and Hamas is in its final stages. At one point during this long roundtable that he held, he got a note from Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who came in a bit later, that said essentially that he believes that they are very close to a deal in the Middle East. The president was asked if he would go after the hostages are released. He said it could be before, it could be shortly after, so that doesn't seem to be as much of an impeding factor for this visit to the Middle East. But President Trump said that trip could happen as soon as this Saturday.
Aaron Navarro at the North Lawn of the White House, thank you very much. Now to the Comey arraignment. CBS News Justice correspondent Scott MacFarlane and former federal prosecutor Scott Frederickson join me now at the table. Scott number 1, Scott M.
Number 1. Sorry, man.
So we slid that right in there.
Well deserved.
I'm very savvy that way. Scott 1. What happened today? You were there.
It was quick. It was invisible to the public because, of course, in federal courts, there's no cameras, there's no audio devices, there's no cell phones. So this piece of history happened just to the people who laid eyes on it in the 6th floor of the federal courthouse in Virginia. James Comey gave a small smile when he entered the courtroom, stood stoic, expressionless during these proceedings. At one point, the judge asked, "Do you understand the charges against him?" And he said, "Yes, I understand them." The 2 not guilty pleas are entered. He's going to be back in court with a motion to dismiss this case by October 20th. The defense attorney said in so many words they think this is a vindictive prosecution. That's one of the motions they're going to file, and they'll do it by a week from Monday.
There's also a motion to file regarding the appointment of the U.S. attorney who brought the indictment. Scott, evaluate the 2 of those potential challenges to the very indictment itself, quite separate from the trial.
Yeah, that's right. It's based on the statute, which allows an interim U.S. attorney to be appointed for 120 days. In this case, that was the predecessor to the present U.S. attorney who stepped in, and got the indictment. This has been the basis of two successful challenges already, one in New Jersey, one in Nevada, where appointed U.S. attorneys had not received confirmation from the U.S. Senate, as required, and they went beyond the 120 days. The administration has tried a few different ways to extend that, and they've lost. And so this is one of the motions that will be filed challenging the indictment, because Lindsay Halligan signed it, saying she was illegally appointed. Interesting, the judge today is going to refer that to the chief judge of the Fourth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals to make that decision.
Okay, what about the vindictive prosecution approach?
Now we're getting into the real meaty stuff here, because Mr. Fitzgerald, counsel for Mr. Comey, came right out of the box. In fact, it was apparent. It seemed like it was the defense who was leading the battle here, not the government. It's usually the opposite. Indeed, the government seemed to stub their toe when they said, this is a complex case and we're, not quite ready. You don't say that if you're walking into
You don't come to court and say we're not ready.
I served there before becoming a special prosecutor, and I'd have a call to my boss by the time I got back if I had said that. But on the other hand, Mr. Fitzgerald said, this was a case brought by the president, President Trump. We're going to file vindictive prosecution. I think you'll see other things. Prosecutorial misconduct. I think they'll seek to bring a motion about potential misconduct in the grand jury. Because remember, strangely enough, this new U.S. attorney only got 2 out of the 3 counts she sought before the grand jury. Very unusual.
Scott, the composition of those representing the federal government was interesting in itself. In that courtroom, there were attorneys from North Carolina. Why?
Those are not familiar faces to this judge, because the new U.S. attorney appointed days ago has never argued in that court before. Lindsay Halligan. She brought on 2 attorneys who are from a different district in America, from North Carolina. An indication there were nobody else in the Eastern District of Virginia who could stand with her and make this case to this judge. That's going to be a big red flag, I would believe, to Judge Michael Nachmanoff, a 2021 appointee of President Biden. This charging document that has been submitted, that was not added to today, is a 1.5 pages long. It is boilerplate. It is bare bones. Very little. It is shorter than the kids' menu at the restaurant. I mean, this thing is 2 or 3 paragraphs. And I think the judge is already flagging that as an issue if they're going to argue in the prosecution that this is a complex case that needs time.
Because that suggests possibly to the judge they don't have their things together at the federal prosecutorial level. And for a case of this gravity, one would think they would.
Well, of course. And if you look at the indictment, there's already mistakes in this indictment. That should have been cleaned up with a superseding indictment before they walked in this morning.
Scott, you were on our program a couple of days ago imagining that there might be a superseding indictment to do that very thing, clean up the mistakes.
Yeah, and that would have to happen presumably in short order, because the timetable's pretty aggressive here. I mean, not uniquely aggressive, but they have a trial date on the calendar for January 5th, getting close to the end of the year here. They have some other deadlines in November and December. There's a finite period of time for them to try to file a superseding indictment, but it feels like one's inevitable, considering how little is in the initial charging document.
Scott McFarland, Scott number 1, Scott Frederickson, super number 1.
Super number 1.
Thank you both. Appreciate it. We turn now to Illinois, specifically the Chicagoland area, where National Guard troops from Texas are now there and could soon be deployed. This, despite fierce objections from state lawmakers, including the governor and the mayor, who've already filed a lawsuit to block this deployment. I'm joined now by our Usher Qureshi, who is covering the latest developments. Usher, what's going on?
Hey there, Major. Let's start with the numbers, okay? About 200 soldiers from the Texas National Guard and about 300 from Illinois have been federalized, ready for deployment under the U.S. Northern Command for at least 60 days. Now, they're supposed to be here to protect federal facilities, personnel, and property, including ICE operations. Their mission could include crowd control, setting up security perimeters to keep federal agents safe. Troops have been training specifically for this, we've been told by the U.S. Northern Command, learning that de-escalation, crowd control tactics, and the standing rules for the use of force. Now, I just sat down with the mayor of Broadview a short while ago. She told us she's been given no information about this type of training that they've supposedly received. She also says she has no confirmation that the troops will arrive tonight outside the immigration facility here in Broadview, though there's been plenty of speculation that that may be the case, Major.
Usher, let's talk about the immigration actions in the Chicagoland area themselves. I've read, and I'd like your insight on this because you're there, I'm not, that they're masked. They sometimes arrive in vehicles that appear to be one kind of vehicle but are another, meaning they're an ICE vehicle, but they're not well marked. There have been some helicopters, rappelling from helicopters. What have we actually seen in terms of the tactics for this immigration enforcement effort?
Well, I think you hit it right on the nail right there. Is it's a mixed bag of nuts in the sense of what we see. Some of these enforcements that we see that are caught on video by bystanders show, one type of deployment where you have like unmarked cars. There is a court case right now where allegedly there were 2 agents inside a vehicle that was marked with an Uber sign, and allegedly sometimes they're using Mexican flags on their vehicles to hide who they are. And then in other cases, they're very clearly marked as ICE agents, and they're involved in very, big operations that are, like you mentioned, there's one that we've been talking about last week that occurred overnight hours. Supposedly these agents, dropped and rappelled down on the roof of an apartment complex and made arrests in about 130 units or so. So it varies, and there's speculation among people you talk to here about, who the professional agents are and who the people who've just signed up to be part of these operations are, and that they're all sort of operating willy-nilly. And that's part of the concern that we're hearing from people who are in these areas, saying, we don't know who is who, and they're wearing masks, they're not identifying themselves, and a lot of times they're not showing badges, and so they don't know who they should go with, who they should not go with, and what they should do.
Trust issues, to be sure, for many reasons. Usher Qureshi, thank you so very much. I appreciate it. Next on the Takeout, as the shutdown, the federal government shutdown, passes the 1-week mark, federal workers, well, they're caught between lots of partisan drama. We'll show you what that looks like. Oklahoma Republican Senator James Langford has called the federal workers caught in all this pawns. He joins me next.
I don't want to keep doing this. I'm going to call it.
California investigative correspondent Julie Watts asked candidate for governor California Katie Porter. Julie will join me next for Porter's reaction and the reaction to that reaction. And Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, clashes with 2 Democratic senators at an Epstein-related press event outside the Speaker's office. We'll show you the heated exchange. The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back to the Takeout. If you're keeping track at home, we are now 8 days into the government shutdown. No end in sight. Oklahoma Republican Senator James Langford joins me now. Senator, I appreciate your time. Do you detect anything breaking on either side of the rank-and-file trenches that have been dug and are getting ever dug deeper in this shutdown?
No, it's been difficult on this. As I've said to a couple of people early on, shutdowns are like wars. They're easy to start, they're hard to stop, because once they're actually in a shutdown, and we're here now for over a week, now it becomes the what is it that changes that actually gets us out of this? The House is not in session. We have a continuing resolution that's clean in front of us. That was typical. The last 4 Septembers, we've been at this exact same moment before. A clean continuing resolution has come up. We've extended it so we could continue negotiations without having a shutdown. This year was very different, as obviously our Democratic colleagues determined they wanted to be able to be the resistance against Trump. And so now here we are. But it's tough to get out of it once you're in it.
What about external events, Senator, like TSA delays, meaning passengers just trying to get through security? That's slowed, that's gummed up because there are fewer personnel there. Air traffic control shortages, towers closed for an hour, 2 hours, sometimes longer. That's flight delays. These things, as I mentioned at the top of my show last night, are beginning to ripple through our national experience. Is that a forcing mechanism?
It is, and I actually had a good conversation with several of my Democratic colleagues even today to say, hey, we got to figure out how to be able to get out of this, because those real consequences are rippling through. Let me give you a couple examples. Air traffic control is not just important what's in the tower now, but who's coming to the tower. The Academy for Air Traffic Control, you have furloughs that are there, which means you don't have more air traffic controllers coming when we all know we have a backlog on that. It's incredibly important. E-Verify is down right now. For private employers, trying to be able to hire people and go through the legal E-Verify process. They can't do that right now because that system is down. We now have furloughing of IRS agents, so people calling in from their business or personal just to be able to get advice from the IRS to be able to fill things out, can't do that right now. So this isn't just hurting government operations, it's hurting private operations in the economy, not to mention the fact that as of this week and this weekend, civilian employees won't be paid for the federal government, and as of next Wednesday, members of the military won't be paid. So this is all about how do we get the government back open so members of the military can be paid, civilians can be paid, and private businesses can go back to doing their job.
Senator, President Trump, whether he intended to or not, and I think he did intend to based on what he said, has injected some curiosity or some vulnerability into whether or not furloughed federal workers are going to be receiving back pay. There's a federal law that he signed in 2019 that guarantees that.
Right.
Are you certain that's going to happen, and do you disagree with the way the president's framed it?
No, federal employees will be paid. I think when you dig down into it, though, the challenge is every federal building and agency also has contract employees. They're sometimes doing food service or janitorial supplies or other things that are around that are ancillary to the functioning. Those are contractors that won't be paid. They never are during a shutdown time period because they're outside contractors. So this belief that everyone will just get back pay is not true on that and hasn't ever been true. Now, federal employees, they will get back pay whether they were sitting at home in furlough or working every day as TSA agents and FBI and ICE agents and other folks continue to be able to do. They'll still get paid, but those individual contractors will not, and their families will be hurt.
What's the atmosphere on the Hill today? There have been two pretty aggressive verbal clashes just this afternoon outside the Speaker's office with Senators Mark Kelly and Ruben Gallego, and then Mike Lawler, a representative from New York, Republican, got into a verbal clash with Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader. These things are playing out on iPhones all over Capitol Hill. I'm sure they'll be viral by 6 p.m. tonight, if not sooner. What's the atmosphere like, Senator?
Yeah, it's frustrated because everybody's looking at everybody saying who's going to move on this, and the challenge we have is we literally cannot do what the Democrats are demanding to do. They're demanding some big health care debate come out. They're currently, their focus, of course, it has been for the past week to do $1.5 trillion of new spending on health care, on climate change initiatives, and all kinds of things that they poked in there. They have in their bill that they want EV vehicles to be able to drive in HOV lanes without having to have an extra person in it. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that's in their demands. We've said this is all ridiculous. We're not going to talk about this right now. Let's just get the government open. Now they've come back and said, okay, what if we just negotiate the extra subsidies we did during COVID for just the COVID area subsidies? But there are lots of issues that are related to that. That's not just a simple extension as well. First of all, it's $450 billion they were looking for a 6-week extension of government funding. Second thing is they had unlimited subsidies because it was during COVID. So that means people making $500 million a year are getting health care subsidies on it. That's absurd. Yeah, I'm sorry, $500,000. You're right, not $500 million. But $500,000 a year are getting health care subsidies. That's ridiculous. They took away the $10 premium time and said it's just going to be zero premium, which has dramatically increased fraud in that program. So there's all kinds of issues that are there. They're saying just extend it. We're saying, well, it's not that simple to just say just extend the COVID area extra subsidy you put in. Then when COVID's gone, lots of fraud. You're getting people with $500,000 of income, extra subsidies. We're not going to do that. And so this demand that they're looking for is a quick negotiation is absurd. Literally, they're trying to get for a few million people, maybe up to 20 million people in our population to get subsidies. But then you've got federal workers and their families and members of the military and their family. They're not getting paid. They're the ones that are actually suffering the consequences of it. So we got to be able to get the government open. That's been the typical route that we've always done in this. So there is some frustration here to say, hey, people are legitimately getting hurt here in the process. Let's get this open.
Senator James Lankford, Republican, Oklahoma. Appreciate the time, sir. Thank you.
You bet. Good to visit with you again.
California gubernatorial candidate Katie Porter threatens to walk out on an interview. I will speak with a reporter next about the questions and Porter's reaction. That's next, right here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Former California Democratic Congresswoman Katie Porter has gone viral. again. This time it's not for her signature whiteboard. You might remember she used those in congressional hearings to ask really tough questions, became kind of famous for it. She's the front runner in California's gubernatorial race. And recently, like the last month or so, she threatened to end an interview with a CBS News investigative correspondent named Julie Watts after an exchange the two had over voters in the state who supported President Trump. Let's watch that.
What do you say to the 40% of California voters who you'll need in order to win, who voted for Trump?
How would I need them in order to win, ma'am?
Well, unless you think you're going to get 60% of the vote. You think you'll get 60%. Everybody who did not vote for Trump will vote for you. That's what you're saying.
In a general election? Yes.
Well, to those voters. Okay, so you...
I don't want to keep doing this. I'm going to call it. Okay. Thank you.
You're not going to do the interview with us?
Nope, not like this. I'm not. Not with 7 follow-ups to every single question you ask.
Every other candidate has answered.
I don't care. I don't care. I want to have a pleasant, positive conversation in which you ask me about every issue on this list. And if every question you're going to make up a follow-up question, then we're never going to get there.
CBS News California investigative correspondent Julie Watts joins me now. Julia, every reporter is sensitive to this. You don't want to be the story. You are not the story. You asked a set of questions, and Katie Porter responded. I'm not suggesting you're the story. You're not. You just asked questions. Her reaction to you has become not only viral in its own sense, but lots of other Democrats seeking the nomination for governor have responded to it. Walk my audience through that process.
So I think it's important to note that she did continue the interview, and we did go on to ask more questions. And you can see that actually in the full 30-minute segment that we have on YouTube. This is a 3-minute segment that was excerpted out of a 30-minute segment where we asked all of the candidates similar questions on the same issues. And we did that so that voters could really see side by side, not just how they feel about the issue, but how they answer when we push back and we sort of ask those tough follow-up questions, right? But I think even in greater context, Major, we had over 13 hours of interviews with 12 candidates on a dozen different issues. And it's a shame that this is the one thing that's gone viral. But frankly, my hope is that it will get people to then go watch the full interviews so they can see, the reason that we actually do this job.
Exactly. Ask questions, get answers, and then hand those answers off to those who are going to make decisions about who they choose to support, who they choose to vote for. Redistricting was something you asked all the candidates about, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it was one of many issues. And listen, in California, it is one of the primary issues. We are being bombarded with what is called Prop 50 ads, for Prop 50, against Prop 50. Early on, this came sort of initially from Governor Newsom and then the Democratic supermajority in California, and they dubbed it the push to stop Trump's power grab. But 40% of California voters voted for President Trump in our last election. And so it was a really fair question that, frankly, 11 out of the 12 candidates answered. And that was, the Democrats anyway, so I guess it wasn't all 11 of them, but the Democrats who supported this along party lines, we said, okay, you support this. However, 40% of Californians support President Trump. And so what do you say to those folks to sort of get their vote back or to explain to them why you're supporting this? And to their credit, they all gave really interesting answers. And some of them said, listen, it's a really tough decision. And it's right for them, it was a party line decision.
Right. And not every conversation that has a follow-up question is by its very nature hostile or unfriendly. It's just a follow-up question. You know that. Perhaps Katie Porter is being reminded of that with all the public reaction and virality this has created. Julie Watts, it's always a pleasure to have you. Thanks so much for your time and your efforts. Shutdown tensions rise on Capitol Hill. Why Speaker Johnson crashed a press gaggle, meaning an interaction between reporters and lawmakers. 2 Democratic senators were involved. Our political panel will watch that, listen to it, and weigh in next here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Thanks for hanging out with us. House Speaker Mike Johnson is keeping the chamber in recess during the government shutdown. Now, lawmakers in the House who want to hold a vote on releasing the full Epstein files are not happy about that. And here's why. See, let me explain this before we run to the sound. Adelita Grijalva just won a special election in Arizona. She's promised to be the 218th vote on a discharge petition to release the aforementioned Epstein files. Until she is sworn in, that can't happen. And with the House not in session, she is not being sworn in. That led to a tense exchange on Capitol Hill just this afternoon. Now, let's go to that sound and video.
It's totally absurd. You guys are experts at red herrings and distraction. No, it has nothing to do with Epstein.
Why don't you bring back your Republican members so we can have a serious negotiation?
We're going to have plenty of negotiations as soon as you open the government.
We did our job. You did not.
Well, you're not doing your job.
Oh, you mean the bill that I'm signed on to extend it?
Stop covering up for the pedophiles.
There's not. That's ridiculous.
Nobody's covering up for pedophiles. So knock it the hell off.
She knows.
You're absolutely absurd.
Okay, I'm going to get back to work. These gentlemen had a publicity stunt here.
Oh, a publicity stunt on Capitol Hill. I've never, ever seen that before. I want to bring in our political panel. Kevin Sheridan, well, you know what all the stuff he's done. RNC, Romney, all that sort of stuff. And Chuck Rocha.
You need to read all mine.
Yeah, CBS News political contributor, senior advisor, Bernie Sanders, and looking very Johnny Cash.
Hello, I'm Johnny Cash.
Folsom Prison. And gentlemen, just so you know, there will be follow-ups. So if you want to leave now, you better head out. You better head out. You better head out.
Pleasant experience.
All right. Look, there doesn't seem to be a plausible explanation from the Speaker of not being in session and not swearing in Adelita Grijalva. Other Republicans who won special elections were sworn in right away. Why not her?
He doesn't want these guys in town. He doesn't want them talking. He doesn't want them doing interviews because they think they've got.
He wants to own the message
in negotiations right now.
And drive the message and have no one else interfere.
And they don't need them here bored with nothing to do. That's just not going to help anyone.
There's no other business they could do? No other legislative things they could consider?
I think he just wants to get through this, get this shutdown over, and...
Chuck?
I think both can be true at the same time. I'll agree with my Republican partner here, but also say that he doesn't want to swear her in because she'll be the 218th vote on the Epstein. He also don't want a bunch of his members on the camera saying what they think about the shutdown. He wants to control that narrative. That's politics 101. And I think that a Navy veteran and a Marine veteran, the two senators from Arizona, put them on the spot today because they're not just senators.
Mark Kelly and Ruben Gallego.
Absolutely. The video you just saw is like they serve the country. When you start talking about folks missing military payments, I think those two guys are good spokesmen for the country.
So there was another clash involving the House Minority Leader, Hakeem Jeffries, and Mike Lawler. He made a cameo appearance in that thing we just played. He's a Republican from New York. Let's play that.
Let me ask you a question.
For years, you always lectured about how we need to keep the government open.
You're making a show of this to make yourself relevant.
It's sad. You could easily sign on to
You're
this.
embarrassing yourself right now. Listen, you're not going to talk. You're not going to talk to me. You're not going to talk to me and talk over me
New York residents
because you don't want to hear what I have to say.
Oh, I'm listening.
So why don't you just keep your mouth shut?
Oh,
because you showed up.
Is that the way to talk?
You showed up.
Oh, boy. Gentlemen, please.
There's a lot of New York politics right there on the screen. People need to remember that you have somebody from the city.
That's sort of like a nice conversation on a street corner in New York, right?
In Texas, where I come from, you get that close to a man, you're going to be moving furniture around.
When you're doing this?
You're already way too close, right?
Yeah.
But this is a lot of Manny Roostering. Like they're out there going, look, I'm fighting for my side, and I'm fighting for my side, and that won't ever be talked about except anywhere on Twitter.
And that's why they're not in town.
Maybe that's a good point.
Because if they were, it'd all just be one big MMA event, right?
Exactly.
Is that right, Kevin? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's exactly what would happen.
Okay. More sound, this on the radio, from Thomas Massie, who is the lead Republican sponsor of the Epstein file discharge petition, which you need 218 signatures to move to the House floor. That's why this whole 218 thing is valid and real and interesting. Play this Massie sound, if you'd be so kind.
This is unprecedented, what's happening. The Speaker has not sworn the new member of Congress in because that's my 218th signature. And so he said as soon as we come out of recess, he will sign the person in. He will swear them in. So not only are we in a shutdown, we're in a recess now. And the Speaker keeps us in recess, keeps us out of Washington, D.C., keeps the lights off in the House chamber so he can avoid swearing in the 218 signature who will allow me to force a vote on releasing the Epstein files.
And Massie, in that same radio interview, said why he believes there is an effort flowing through the House Republican leadership to keep the Epstein files where they are now, in the Justice Department's possession and not out publicly. Listen.
The true reasons they don't want to release these files is there are billionaires, former and current politicians, all implicated in these files. And they are politically connected. They've donated money to Republican and Democratic causes.
Kevin.
Are they implicated in crimes, or are they just in the files?
Right.
But yeah,
which could be not criminal, but embarrassing and reputationally harmful.
Right. I have no idea what's in those files, but I think that's probably the answer, is that there would be a lot of names in there that would be
You think Max is probably more right than wrong about that?
Probably. I mean, he's a party of one in that caucus, but yeah, he's going to side with Democrats to try to pull this thing through. They have to come back at some point.
There's no doubt, as the Democrats sitting here, that there are Democrats on that list. And as a Democrat today, I say release it. Let's see who's on there. If they're there, then they're there.
And they have to explain it.
Right, absolutely.
And account for whatever they did or didn't do.
All of us who are sitting at this table and around this watching this have been accountable for things you've done wrong. None of us are perfect, and you be accountable and you move on.
You be accountable and move on. And to Kevin's point, eventually this is going to happen.
Right.
There's going to be a House vote.
Right.
It won't get to the president's desk. The files may not release, but it will be something that the House Republican leadership will have to reckon with at some point.
Massey makes Kevin's point again, is that's why they're not here.
They still have phones, though.
They'll find a radio interview. They'll be on 15 podcasts.
See, these fine gentlemen can handle follow-up questions. It's not that hard. Ooh. Chuck Rocha, Kevin Sheridan, thank you very much. Which camera? 2? Okay, we'll go over to 2. From Capitol Hill to Main Street. How the government shutdown could affect the economy. We haven't seen a lot yet, but we might. I'll speak with a top Treasury Department official about that next, right here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout and the Conversation Corner. Now, the stock market is not the only verdict on the economic consequences of the shutdown. It's one of a lot of data points. And for what it's worth, on the 8th day of the shutdown, the Dow Jones closed a tick down, just a tick. NASDAQ and the S&P both ended in positive territory. But let's have a conversation about the shutdown, the economy, and other related issues. Joe Lavorgna. He's a senior counselor to Treasury Secretary, not President, not yet, Scott Bessent. I'm just kidding about that. It's great to have you here, Joe.
Thank you, Major. My pleasure.
Look, we have a $31.5 trillion economy. A federal government shutdown of 8 days is not going to bring it to its knees. It's not even going to be a blip. But there are potential ripple effects going on. How do you evaluate those?
So the key thing is the Republicans want the government open. We don't have 60 votes to prevent the filibuster.
In the Senate.
And historically...
So you need Democrats to cross over.
We need Democrats to cross over. What's interesting is I went back and looked over 4 prior administrations, Democrats, Carter, Clinton, Obama, and Biden. When the Republicans were the minority party, they supported 15 clean continuing resolutions. The Democrats themselves supported 13 in the last 4 years.
A lot of history here.
4 times to which the Republicans went on board. The Democrats are being hypocrites on this. We want the government open. Foundationally, President Trump has laid the groundwork for a boom. We're seeing it in the GDP data. But there's a lot of hardship and pain. Military people or traffic controllers, people that depend on paychecks. Business and consumer confidence, if this persists, will get hurt. CEA has estimated that, Council of Economic Advisors, that we could lose $15 billion per week. Yes, it's a $30 trillion plus economy, but why waste money? Why waste lost opportunity? So there's a lot of things that we'd like to get done, and getting back to work is important. I hope it's sooner than later.
Let's have a conversation about the tariff story that we have seen play out so far. What is the tariff latest estimate? So
in January, it's customs and excise duty, so it's excise taxes. So it's a very good proxy for the tariff number. We'll get that official number when the monthly Treasury statement comes out. But essentially, we're running at just under $300 billion annual rate
for this
year.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see what happens in October, November, and December. If you take the last few months and you project them forward into next year, which would make sense, you're up 360 to 400 billion potentially, maybe more. I mean, it's a big number, which is why even CBO, who is very pessimistic,
Congressional Budget Office, right?
Congressional Budget Office is saying, look, over a 10-year period, you could cut the deficit and debts by $4 trillion. It's a substantial amount of money. And that's what President Trump and Secretary Bessent highlighted as something to be very additive to restoring fiscal responsibility.
And the president has said very recently, Joe, that some of that money, as much as $10 billion, might be allocated to soybean farmers in our country and other agriculture interests hurt by a Chinese boycott of exports.
Right, that's right.
What can you tell us about that?
Well, the details haven't come out yet. The president has talked about potentially giving money to farmers. I mean, the flyover states, middle America, the everyday worker, the mom and pop businesses, those are all Trump's voters in many respects, the industrial heartland. And obviously the farming industry, the agricultural industry is very important. So the president's going to do what he can to lessen the pain of the fact that Chinese.
And he would argue that tariff revenue is something he can call upon to do exactly that.
Right.
Because they are related.
They are related. And also the thing about the tariffs, which people don't understand, is Secretary Besson was pushing these trade deals through, which many people didn't think would happen, is you get reindustrialization, you get capital coming into the U.S. That's why the president highlights all this money that's coming in from other countries and other companies. That's important because as money comes in, they could build. They're going to create American jobs, new American industry, high-tech value-added manufacturing jobs, those sorts of things that are 21st century.
And how do you evaluate, Joe, the statistics so far that show, so far in the Trump administration, manufacturing down about 31,000 net?
Yeah, well, the thing is the labor market, some of my friends on the other side would say, well, we left you guys a good economy. No, you didn't, because we know that in the last 2 years, job growth, the non-farm payroll data was overstated by 2 million workers. So that's a big number. So the momentum is down, has been down in the labor market. The economy is up because a lot of the spending has been on the business side because that reflects confidence in President Trump's policies. But Major, again, if the government does not open, the labor market will suffer more. So that's why, the economy is as great as it could be with what President Trump has put forward, but we need a full throttled approach to get the government open, to get the economy moving, and the labor market will turn and get better. And over time, you'll get those manufacturing jobs.
The Wall Street Journal had a story with an interesting headline recently. I'd like you to evaluate it. It said the message that's going to come out from the White House about the economy is not roaring now, but wait till next year, meaning 2026. Is that the way it's being talked about within the White House?
I don't understand that because—
You saw the story.
I saw the story, read the story. It didn't make any sense to me because in the second quarter, the economy grew 3.8%. If you take federal spending out, because the Trump administration is trying to right-size government, get rid of less, the wasteful spending, the economy grew 4.5%. So real GDP ex the federal sector grew 4.5%. The Atlanta Fed, which is widely followed as GDP at 3.8. So the economy is doing great, but we're worried that the Democrat-led shutdown could slow us, and we want the economy to do even better. So yes, we're good now. We're going to be better next year.
Joe, I appreciate the time. Please come back.
Sure. Thank you.
Speaking of the shutdown, tune in tomorrow, where I will be joined by, drum roll, House Speaker Mike Johnson.
Whatever the hell happens, this climate change, it's the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world, in my opinion.
Climate scientist Michael E. Mann has long been a critic of President Trump's repeated climate denials. He's got a new book out, what he calls The Assault on Science. Our conversation next, right here on, you guessed it, The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. According to critics, Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and the Trump administration writ large have been pushing a quote-unquote anti-science agenda. But a new book, Science Under Siege, argues it is not just the federal government that is putting public health and science at risk. Here's my conversation with climate scientist and the book's co-author, Michael Mann. Michael, great to have you here in the Conversation Corner. Science Under Siege is the book. You have 5 Ps that are problematic in this space. I want to let you run them down. First, plutocrats.
Yeah, thanks, Major. It's great to be with you. I'm a sucker for alliteration, and so we've got plutocrats, we've got petrostates, we've got
professionals,
the pros, the propagandists, and yes, the press
as well. And the press, okay, can't wait for that one. But let's start with plutocrats. Why are they a problem in this question of what happens to science and how we digest what we learn?
Yeah, so there's this massive anti-science infrastructure now, conservative media, social media that's been weaponized to promote misinformation. Elon Musk, when he took over Twitter, the algorithm was actually tweaked in a way that really promotes a lot of the misinformation, anti-science misinformation, suppresses actual good scientific information. And so a lot of this infrastructure is funded by a relatively small number of plutocrats, Rupert Murdoch and the Murdoch media empire, people like Elon Musk, the Koch brothers who have funded these various think tanks and front groups that promote climate denial, and yes, also anti-vax propaganda.
Petrostates.
Yeah, so, typically we think about Russia, Saudi Arabia. These are countries that primarily derive their economy from the extraction of resources and, in particular, fossil fuels. Russia, Saudi Arabia. But right now, given the politics, the prevailing politics in the U.S., we would have to consider the United States a petrostate as well.
And professionals.
Yeah, so I sort of lump the professionals and the propagandists. These are basically the folks down in the trenches. They're talking heads who are paid to promote, to spout misinformation, anti-science misinformation about climate change, about renewable energy, about vaccination. They are trolls and bots, bot armies that have been weaponized to spread misinformation on social media. But these are basically the individuals who help spread these anti-science talking points that are fostered by the plutocrats and the petrostates. These are the guys down in the trenches spreading it.
Are there any of the professionals you're concerned about within the Trump administration?
Well, there certainly are. I mean, RFK Jr., who, now we have as head of Health and Human Services, somebody who is staunchly anti-vaccine at a time when we are so fundamentally threatened, coming out of COVID-19, but there is the threat of ever more deadly pandemics. And we are seeing in the Trump administration, because of the policies of RFK Jr., we're seeing a movement away from vaccination, a movement away from all the public health measures that we need to deal with these threats.
And I'm personally involved in the fifth P, the press.
Yeah, so, there's the conservative press. I mentioned the Murdoch media empire that has promoted climate denialism on, Fox News, the Wall Street Journal editorial pages, various conservative newspapers around the world.
Websites and the like.
Websites websites. We're talking print media, we're talking television media, so even though we call it the press, we're really talking about the media writ large. And the conservative media, in large part has played the primary role in spreading this anti-science misinformation, but we do take to task the legacy media. Mm-hmm. And we're talking New York Times, we're talking Washington Post, who are increasingly engaged in what we call performative neutrality, where they present anti-science. For example, the lab leak theory. There's no scientific support for the lab leak theory of COVID-19. All of the scientific evidence supports what we call the zoonotic spillover. There are DNA markers that tell us that that's what's happened. So the peer-reviewed literature, the science says it was zoonotic. It was from bats, pangolins, wet markets. That's how it originated. But there is this conspiracy theory that it was a lab leak in China, in Wuhan, China, and the New York Times, the Washington Post have platformed that pseudoscientific theory.
On this point, people will decide for themselves, Michael, what information is or misinformation or disinformation is. And that has become a sort of consumer preference that has real-world consequences. But they're going to do that. And you labeling it misinformation or disinformation isn't going to land with them. You know this.
Yeah, I hearken back to the days of, CBS Evening News when Walter Cronkite would tell us that's the way it was on whatever date it was. And we all accepted this set of common facts, and we could agree to disagree about the implications.
Within those parameters.
Within those parameters, and we've lost that. We've lost that sort of trusted, messengers that provide, so we're no longer dealing with the same universes of facts in the conservative world and in the progressive world. And it makes it very difficult to have conversations about crises that we face, like the climate crisis or, COVID-19 pandemics, when we can't even agree on the basic science, because we can't solve these problems without understanding what's causing them.
And Science Under Siege is one way to maybe balance those scales. Michael Mann, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy Wednesday, everyone. This is The Takeout. Relentlessly curious, reliably civil, occasionally clever. The Daily Report starts